everyone, it's Sarah or LavilyDay here with another after image story video. As always, if you haven't already seen my other story videos, be sure to check them out first. I'll link the playlist in a card up here somewhere as well as in the description below. So, quick recap, last time we got to witness a day in Ray's life. It had started normal enough, but was cut short after she had an encounter with a blue-haired man and picked up an orb he had dropped. Ray lost consciousness, and next thing she knew, she was waking up to a pair of glowing red eyes, and boy did she scream. So let's continue from there. Ray tries to move, but her body is heavy and something doesn't feel right. Panicked, she looks around. She appears to be in some sort of workshop. There are tools hanging from the walls, and a bunch of prosthetic limbs and other bits and pieces scattered around. What was she doing in a place like this, and how did she get here? The grey-skinned guy with the glowing eyes is frozen in place. He's just standing there staring at Ray without even blinking. And it's raining really hard. Hopefully that's not too distracting. He's just standing there staring at Ray without even blinking. He's a Cynthia for sure. I guess that would explain his inhuman features. Although Cynthia are synthetic, the majority of them have pretty human features, but even so, a fair few play up their artificial nature to the extreme. At the corner of her eye, Ray spies another Cynthia slowly making their way towards her. This one is visually similar except for the fact that it is noticeably smaller. Its mouth is twisted into a wide grin and its eyes are cold. Behind them, Ray spies a door, perhaps a way out. Without allowing herself any more time to analyze the situation, she grits her teeth and decides to make a run for it. Except, as hard as she tries, Ray can't seem to move. What on earth had this Cynthia done to her? Slowly, she casts her eyes down over her body. Nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. It was no wonder she couldn't feel her limbs. They weren't there. And before Ray is able to make a noise, she faints from shock. Lee was sitting in the front of the store. Just moments earlier, he had sprinted back to Lovelace and his leg was not thanking him for it. His mission had been a complete and utter failure, and all he had to show for it was a stupid little orb. Mind you, Rem had taken a liking to it, having whisked it off his hands as soon as he'd shown it to her. I will test its viability, she had said, whatever that means. So soon after, when Lee heard a scream, he was considerably perplexed. He leapt out of his seat and went to investigate. In the back room, Rem and Rom were standing in front of a dismantled Cynthia. Lee approaches them and asks where the noise had come from. Before he finishes his question though, the Cynthia in front of them begins to stir. Perhaps the drive isn't corrupt after all, Rem says, as she releases the mechanism on the front of the torso, allowing it to slot back into place. Lee pushes past to get a better look. The Cynthia has no arms or legs and is suspended against the wall. Its head is lolled forward as if it has been sleeping and was unable to find a way to rest it comfortably. The Cynthia has been assembled from a mismatch of parts, some of which look quite old and worn. As Lee stands in front of it, it groggily raises its head and looks at Lee. It blinks heavily a couple of times before furrowing its brow and starting to stare. Of course, Lee has no idea what's going on, and he doesn't exactly enjoy being stared at, so he quickly blurts out, "What are you staring at?" The Cynthia opens its mouth as if to respond, but then freezes in place. Its eyes widen with fear, and then it looks down. All of a sudden, the Cynthia starts to shake uncontrollably. Lee, realizing what could be causing such a reaction, turns back to Rem and Rom. "Hey, find this guy some arms and legs," he says. Lee puts a hand on either side of the Cynthia's face and assures it that everything will be okay. It doesn't take long for Rem and Rom to procure some limbs and fully assemble the Cynthia. The Cynthia remains mute throughout the process, although it does eventually stop shaking. Lee is noticeably concerned, standing off to the side while Rem and Rom work. But the moment Rem locks the final leg in place, it attempts to make a run for it, except it's still suspended on the wall, so all it manages to do is flail around, kicking Lee in the shin of his bad leg in the process. Lee recoils and shouts, "What was that for? Can't you see we're trying to help you?" Lee then turns to Rem and yells, "What is this guy even doing here in the first place? I thought you were checking that orb I found." "We did," Rem replies. "We installed the drive into our testing unit to determine its viability. As you can see, it is functional." There is a brief moment of silence, and then the Cynthia speaks up. By orb, you wouldn't happen to mean the one you dropped at the hospital? Lee turns to them and slowly says, "How do you know about that? Who are you?" "I'm Ray," the Cynthia replies. "You crashed into me and then just ran off." Lee shakes his head. "There's no way they're the person from the hallway." "But that's impossible," Lee retorts. "Unless..." His voice trails off and he becomes lost in thought. Lee had found that orb in the ICU. It had been dropped off by none other than someone from the neurology and genetics lab. The very same group that had claimed to have saved Lee from the brink of death, and who were responsible for transferring him into his cybernetic body. That orb must have been destined for the patient in that room. Except Lee had intercepted that delivery, and instead it had come into contact with a different human. A human who was now claiming to be standing, or rather hanging, right in front of him. Not as a human, but a Cynthia. There was no other explanation. "I don't know how," Lee says, "but that orb, I think you were absorbed into it." There's a bit of back and forth between Lee and Ray, where they argue over this hypothesis, until Ray blurts out, "How do I know you're not just trying to trick me? You kidnap me, tie me to the wall, take my arms and my legs, and now you're trying to tell me it wasn't you, but some ball? That's ridiculous, not to mention impossible. Human and Cynthia minds aren't compatible. This is all just some ploy to get one over on humans somehow." Lee laughs in her face. "Sure," he says. "Except if that were the case, what would we have to gain from putting you back together again? Besides, I doubt even these two would have cared enough to give you such a handsome face." Ray reaches up to touch her cheek in response. "What about my face?" she says. Lee bends down to pick up a piece of sheet metal propped up against the wall and holds it in front of Ray. "You tell me," he says. Staring back is the image of a stranger, a Cynthia with green eyes and a strong jawline. She can see lines going across her face and a faint glow behind her eyes. This had to be a cruel joke, but it was undeniably her reflection. Ray puts her hand on top of the makeshift mirror and pushes it aside. "You have to fix this," she says. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I hope you enjoyed this installment. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below telling me what you think. And before I go, I will give you a slightly closer look at this new doll who you now will know as Ray. I did film myself doing this face up, so expect that sometime soon. If you're not already subscribed, I would love it if you joined me here. I upload a new video every weekend on Sundays. Thank you so much for watching. It has been lovely, and I'll catch you in another video sometime soon. It's raining a lot out there, and there's sirens. It's a great time to film.